It's such a tragedy that should never occur. 2 babies lost their mother, and we're learning through this investigation that she was just a beautiful person inside and out.
That mother was Madeline Cuevas. The father of her 2 children is now accused of murdering her and taking off for Mexico. I lay out the case detectives say they have built against Jonathan Maldonado Cruz. Thanks for joining me for Crime Fix. I'm Anjanette Levy. Madeline Cuevas was a young mother to 2 adorable daughters. Her family loved her dearly, and you can tell from videos that she posted on social media that she loved her daughters more than anything. But Madeline's life was sadly taken from her, ripped away in the middle of the night in her home south of Fresno, California. The sheriff says the man who murdered Madeline was someone she once loved, the father of her children, Jonathan Maldonado Cruz. Maldonado Cruz faces a first-degree murder charge with special circumstances of lying in wait and an additional gun enhancement, and that makes him eligible for the death penalty in the state of California if prosecutors decide to pursue it. Maldonado Cruz is also charged with kidnapping for ransom, robbery, child stealing, grand theft, and a misdemeanor fleeing charge. A video on TikTok shows that Maldonado Cruz and Madeline Cuevas were once very happy. They were engaged. According to family members, the couple had been dating since high school, but recently the relationship ended. Prosecutors say they have evidence that Madeline was caught off guard, completely unaware of her ex-boyfriend's plans. Kings County Sheriff Dave Robinson went over the case in a press conference, starting with how his agency learned that something was wrong with Madeline.
Madeline's father alerted us to that they had not been in contact with Madeline, and so about 4 p.m. On Tuesday, January 28th, we went to the residence that they had already made entry into and discovered that she was deceased inside the residence. The deputies arrived on scene and discovered her, and she had a gunshot wound to her body. And some of the things I'm not going to get into specifics today, so I'll leave it at gunshot wound. The detectives were called out and took over the investigation. In a short amount of time, detectives determined the homicide most likely took place on Monday night or early Tuesday morning, a little after midnight, about 1 a.m.
After the shooting, Sheriff Robinson said Maldonado Cruz took the 2 daughters that he shared with Madeline Cuevas and ran for the border to Mexico.
The suspect had about a 15-hour head start on this. Detectives learned real quickly that 2 children were possibly with the suspect, and some of the initial information indicated that he may have fled to Mexico. Our agency immediately enlisted the help of the FBI. They were able to begin coordinating with local and federal authorities in both the United States and Mexico with the sole purpose at this point of getting the children returned back safely. In cases like this, you focus a lot on the suspect, but when there's children involved, the utmost important was getting those children back safely.
Everyone, and I mean everyone, has a cell phone. That would play a very important role in tracking Maldonado Cruz, but his phone wasn't the only important part of this investigation.
The FBI began tracking both cell phones, and when I say both cell phones, I'll clarify, the suspect's cell phone and the victim's cell phone was also missing. And through that tracking, they determined that the suspect had gone south to Mexico and across the Mexican-American border. As detectives, the FBI and Mexican authorities began to close in on the suspect's whereabouts. Detectives were able to successfully negotiate the surrender of the suspect this morning and the safe return of the children to authorities at the border crossing of San Ysidro. The suspect's mother was a critical part of these negotiations, and we thank her for this. I know that was probably not an easy thing for her to do.
You heard that right. With the assistance of the suspect's mother, she was probably very worried about her adorable little granddaughters and her son. Maldonado Cruz surrendered with the girls at the border crossing just south of San Diego.
I just would like to extend my appreciation to the Mexican authorities again, and especially we understand that one of the Mexican authorities unit member was injured in this effort. I don't know his condition, but we hope he's doing okay in recovery.
Now, it's been reported that those 2 little girls, ages 3 and 2, are safe with family now. Police thank the public for spreading the word to help reunite the girls with their family. Now, the Amber Alert for the girls was originally issued out of Kings County, but it happened the next day. It expanded to multiple counties near the Mexico border. Some have questioned why the sheriff's office didn't issue an Amber Alert immediately for Madeline's daughters, but that wasn't a mistake. Sheriff Robinson said delaying it was strategic. It was done by design.
We thought that perhaps there was a mistake early on, but we learned through this process that there's two levels of an Amber Alert. One is that fact sheet that they send back to local agencies immediately that you can share locally. And one is you have to specifically tell them, hey, hit the statewide emergency alert button. And there was some discussion during that time frame whether or not that should go out. And so I'm not going to call it a mistake because in this case we have two little girls back that are safe and happy and seem to be doing well. But it's a tactical move. And, in hindsight, could we have put it out? We could have. Would it have worked? It might have. The Monday morning quarterback in me sometimes thinks that, hey, maybe we could have. But I'm super pleased that it worked out the way it did as I stand here today. Thank you.
As if that wasn't enough, just 2 days after Madeline's murder, someone took advantage of the home being empty and they broke in through a back window, burglarizing the home. Kings County deputies are still searching for that suspect. Randy Kessler is a family law attorney based in Atlanta. Randy, I feel like this is just one in a number of cases I've covered lately involving an ex or a spouse accused of murdering their significant other. I mean, it just seems like these are popping up in the news a lot lately. You are in the family law business. I mean, why is this so, it feels like it's so common.
Right. And, there was one recent case where there was a brawl in a murder case where the nephew or whatever it was, but it's family law that really gets the emotions, right? In a criminal case, the person who's on trial knows they did something wrong and knows they're going to be punished in some way. Family law, you're living your life, you've got a relationship with your family, your children, and one day that relationship ends and a judge or your ex says, these are the new rules. This is how often you get to see your children and you don't get to have me as your mate anymore. That's a lot to digest, and everyone has a hard time with it. Very few people say, okay, I'll just move right along. But, some people take it to the extreme, and it just makes them snap. And we're always concerned when we tell somebody, okay, when you file, that's the danger time. Even if you think they should know it's coming because you haven't had sex in 5 years, when you do something official and you end a relationship or you limit someone's time with their children, that's a very dangerous time, and these cases show exactly why.
Oh, yeah. And, this is a young couple. I mean, apparently they had been dating since high school. They had been together a really long time. They had these two adorable little children. And then the relationship ends. And everybody, the family members, they seem to be just shocked by this. I mean, just absolutely shocked. I mean, yes, relationships end, and we all know how that can go. But I mean, does this happen where people just like that, where everybody
Yeah,
around them they just can't believe it? It just seems very unusual to
it's
me
shocking.
that.
It's shocking because, yeah, I'm sorry. It's shocking because it's not a stranger. If you walk down the street and a stranger mugs you, rapes you, does something, it's shocking. But we all know they're bad people out there. But this is somebody that you or your family member loved and cared for and was intimate with. That's what's shocking about it. It's not some stranger and random act of violence. This is someone you bonded with, had children with, that has not only stopped liking you or loving you or caring for you, but done the exact 180-degree opposite of love. That's to me what's shocking about it. And that's when people snap. And
Mhm.
people need to be more aware and more careful. You just wouldn't think that your ex. Everyone thinks I'm over it. He'll get over it. And it could be some version of, well, if I can't have her, nobody else can have her. And we've all heard that. And there's something in it. I mean, there's a reason that kind of storyline, that kind of movie line, that kind of book line is relevant and appealing to people, because a lot of us feel that way when somebody breaks up with you. I'm so mad. She's mine. I worked so hard. I invested so much time, energy, money into this relationship. It's not fair that it's not going to work out. I'll never find anybody like her. That it's just shocking the more you think about it, the more you dig into it, you can start to understand the hurt and the anger. But to get it to this level, it's always going to shock me.
Randy, one of the things that's really stunning to me is the allegation, Jonathan Maldonado Cruz, he enjoys the presumption of innocence as all criminal defendants do. But the allegation here is that he killed Madeline, the mother of his children, the one-time love of his life, and then took those little girls and then took off for Mexico. And with the help of his own mother, the law enforcement gets him to surrender with those little girls. I'm sure mom, was just scared to death and wanted him to turn himself in and wanted those little girls to be safe. So that's a pretty unique thing that we have here. His own mother talking him into surrendering.
Yeah, I mean, there are three interesting points of those set of facts. One is, of course, a murderer, an alleged murderer, fleeing across the border from the United States into Mexico is sort of contrary to all the PR and everything that's out there in today's environment. So that's just sort of interesting. But two other points. One is, very good on law enforcement. Bravo to not go out there and tell the whole world and scare him and try to figure out how to get mom to help and how to get him to turn himself in. Whatever they said, whatever they did, it worked. And then finally, what's interesting to me is, does he get any credit, any brownie points for turning himself in? Like, of course, he's not a good guy. And if he's the murderer, then for sure he should be locked away forever, if not given the death penalty. But on the other hand, we've seen people that do this and they want to bury all evidence. Then they kill the children, and then the children's lives are gone too. He didn't do that. It shows that he must have had some sense of remorse or acknowledgement that what he did was wrong. And does that count for something? I don't think it means that he's a good guy, but does it make him a little bit better than some of the other people we've seen that have gone the extra mile and not only murdered the mom of the children, but murdered the children and gone off and murdered other family members or mom's new lover? So to some degree, an ounce of credibility or an ounce of forgiveness or an ounce of something on the sentencing, he's got something to play with. His lawyers have something they can argue that he maybe had lost it and was insane and came back to sanity, came back to a sense of reason. Of course, it does look well orchestrated and planned out. So, it looks a little premeditated to me. I don't think insanity is going to work, but at least his lawyer has something to work with.
Yeah. And I do want to touch on that because you're saying it looks premeditated. I mean, the prosecution, the DA obviously thinks that it was premeditated. I mean, there's special circumstances, enhancements added to this, like he was lying in wait. So they could potentially seek the death penalty against him because of these special enhancements that they've added. So, and they say Madeline had no clue. I mean, she had no clue that this was coming from their investigation, which is so incredibly awful. That he was basically staking her out. You hear lying in wait, Randy, and it's just absolutely terrifying.
It is. It's a whole interesting discussion, and a psychologist would have a field day with enhancements. Do you get punished more for these enhancements, lying in wait, premeditation? I mean, the bottom line is murder is murder is murder. And whether it was spur of the moment, whether it was, ramming somebody with a car in New Orleans, whether it was lying in wait, they're all terrible. How do you differentiate degrees of terribility or awfulness? But that's what the law does. And the prosecutor is going to look at this case and say, not only was this murder and terrible, it has enhanced aspects, and we're going to seek the death penalty because this qualifies as the worst of the worst of the worst. But yes, it is awful, but it's hard to say that somebody who was murdered without the premeditation isn't just as awful to that family. So it's very hard to get into the weeds on how awful is truly awful, but this is up there.
And those two little kids, those two little girls, are sadly now without parents. Both their parents. It's awful. One of the things I do want to touch on too is the fact that law enforcement held off on issuing the Amber Alert because that could have, who knows what that could have triggered. And I thought it was a really good thing that they worked it through the back channels with his mother for a time and tried to get him to turn himself in that way. So the Amber Alert, we all know what happens when they issue an Amber Alert. It goes up all over the signs on the highway. It's all over the TV. It's plastered everywhere. Everybody gets alerts on their cell phones. I mean, that maybe could have spooked him. And who knows possibly what could have happened had that alert been issued sooner.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Amber Alert is the cure of last resort when you have nothing else. So it's easy to second guess. And like if they had not caught him, everybody would be saying, why didn't they issue the Amber Alert earlier? And who would want to be making those decisions and be second guessed by the public and the family? But it sounds like they did the right thing and they have their protocol. If there are other options that are better than an Amber Alert, you try those first. And they did try them, and thank goodness it worked. And maybe in other situations when there's no Amber Alert issued right away, that's probably what's going on behind the scenes. And you've got to trust law enforcement. They do this, unfortunately, more than this is the first time for the family and everyone who's second guessing law enforcement. But they got it right. They didn't stop the murder, but they stopped further murders and further abduction. These children could have been kept away. They could have been murdered. They could have been just secreted away to some country and lived in a third world country with no money and no real hope for any kind of life. They have a chance now. They don't have their mother, but they'll have a life.
What's your best advice for people who are separating from somebody and would never, ever, ever in a million years think that something like this could happen?
It's what I do every day. Prepare for the worst. Think about the worst. It's why people don't like divorce lawyers, right? We say this could happen. No, he would never do that. Okay, well, if he never does that, then you don't need me. I'm not really going to serve. But if something goes wrong, this is what you need to be prepared for. They're not going to take all the money out of the bank account. They're not going to kidnap your kids. They're not going to destroy the house. They're not going to be violent. All those things that you think that's somebody else's problem. You don't have to think it's going to happen to you, but think, if it happens to me, could I have prevented it? Or what can I do to limit the exposure? Could I have an alarm system? Could I have a camera, at my house, security camera? Think about if you're starting to be in one of these situations, a relationship going wrong, it's not horrible to think like that. You're not going to ruin your life thinking all the time that something bad's going to happen. But just be aware. People snap. The best people do bad things. And we hear it all the time, right, Anjanette? It's always not in my neighborhood, not my family, not our community. Nobody would do this. Not my spouse, not my boyfriend. Yes, your spouse, your boyfriend is human. And you never know.
Yeah, you just never know. It's just so sad. And my heart goes out to Madeline Cuevas' family and those little girls. Randy Kessler, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.